The debris floated in the darkness of space where New Portland used to be. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESS Valiant and watched the pieces of homes and buildings drift past his ship. 2 million people had lived on that colony just 3 days ago. Now, there was nothing but wreckage and silence. The Zephron Empire had attacked without warning and without mercy. They had not targeted military bases or defensive stations. They had fired their weapons directly at schools and hospitals and neighborhoods where families lived. Jake clenched his fists as he watched the footage again. The attack had lasted 6 hours. The Zephrons had taken their time and made sure nothing survived. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her station, and her hands shook as she worked. She had family on New Portland. Her sister and 2 nephews had lived in the Northern District. They were gone now, along with everyone else. Amy looked up at Jake and waited for orders. The whole crew waited. They had sent 17 formal complaints to the Galactic Council about Zephron aggression over the past 10 years. The Council had ignored every single one. Earth was considered a minor species in the galaxy. The older civilizations treated humans like children who should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. The Council gave Earth no real power and no real voice in galactic affairs. The communication system beeped, and Admiral Peter Holland appeared on the main screen. His face looked like it was carved from stone. There was no emotion in his eyes, but Jake could see the anger underneath. Holland had served in the human fleet for 40 years and had spent most of that time begging the Council to take Earth seriously. Those days were over now. Holland spoke in a quiet voice that somehow made his words more frightening. He told Jake that the Council had refused to investigate the attack. They had classified New Portland as an unfortunate incident and closed the case within 6 hours. The Zephron ambassador had offered a formal apology, and the Council had accepted it. 2 million dead humans were worth nothing more than an apology. Jake felt something break inside him. He had believed in the system. He had trusted that the Council would eventually recognize Earth as an equal. He had been wrong. The Council did not respect diplomacy or patience. They only respected power, and Earth had tried too hard to play by rules that were designed to keep them weak. Admiral Holland continued speaking and told Jake that the President had authorized Operation Reckoning. Earth was done asking for permission. The human fleet was being recalled to Earth orbit for reassignment. New orders would follow within 48 hours. Around Jake, the bridge crew began moving with purpose. Tactical Officer Greg Palmer pulled up navigation charts and started calculating jump coordinates. Communications Specialist Lauren Hayes opened encrypted channels to every human ship in Council space. Medical Officer Dr. Chris Bennett prepared the medical bay even though they were not in combat. Everyone knew what was coming. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far, and now they would learn what humans did when their patience ran out. The ESS Valiant jumped to hyperspace and left the debris field behind. Jake sat in his command chair and thought about what was coming. Earth had 300 warships scattered across known space. Most of them were exploration vessels or light cruisers designed for defense. They were not enough to fight a war against a Council member species, but Jake knew that Admiral Holland and the Earth Military Command had been preparing for this possibility for years. They had hidden projects and secret weapons that the Council knew nothing about. Humanity had learned from every species they encountered. They had studied Zephron shield technology and ascended energy weapons and Torvac navigation systems. Earth had taken all that knowledge and built something new. The trip back to Earth took 5 days. Jake spent most of that time reviewing intelligence reports about Zephron military capabilities. The Zephrons were one of the oldest species in the Council. Their empire covered 12 star systems, and their military had not fought a real war in 300 years. They had grown comfortable and lazy. They relied on their reputation and their advanced shields to keep them safe. The Council protected them because the Zephrons controlled important trade routes and had significant political influence. That protection was about to end. When the ESS Valiant arrived at Earth orbit, Jake saw something that made his breath catch. The shipyards around Luna Station were filled with new vessels. These were not exploration ships. They were warships built with a single purpose. Heavy armor covered their hulls and massive weapons bristled from every angle. Jake counted 48 heavy cruisers and twice that many support vessels. Earth had been building this fleet in secret for years, and now they were ready to use it. Admiral Holland contacted Jake again and ordered him to report to Earth Military Command Headquarters. Jake took a shuttle down to the surface and entered the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with officers and analysts, working at displays and terminals. Admiral Holland stood at the center platform with President Maria Caldwell and Secretary of Defense Kevin Morris. They were reviewing tactical plans and fleet deployments. Jake joined them and listened as they explained Operation Reckoning. The plan was aggressive and brutal, and designed to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. Earth was not going to file another complaint or request another investigation. They were going to take justice into their own hands. The target was the Zephron home system of Draxos. The plan called for a rapid strike that would cripple their military capability without destroying their civilization. Earth would disable their defensive network and capture High Commander Vex Azlar, who had personally ordered the attack on New Portland. Vex Azlar would be brought back to Earth to stand trial for war crimes. The Galactic Council would condemn the operation, but they would not be able to ignore it. Earth was going to prove that humans could no longer be dismissed or ignored. The galaxy would learn that attacking Earth came with consequences. Jake returned to the ESS Valiant with new orders and a sense of purpose he had never felt before. His ship would lead the assault fleet into Zephron space. They would jump in at the edge of the system and destroy the perimeter defense stations before the Zephrons could react. Other ships would target the planetary shield generators, while special operations teams extracted Vex Azlar from his command center. The whole operation was expected to take less than 6 hours. Jake gathered his senior officers and briefed them on the mission. Amy Carter smiled for the first time since New Portland. Greg Palmer checked and rechecked his weapons systems. Lauren Hayes composed the message that would be broadcast to the Galactic Council after the operation was complete. Everyone on board knew they were about to make history. The shipyards around Luna Station hummed with constant activity. Vice Admiral Lisa Grant walked through the construction bays and watched thousands of workers assembling the final components of the battle fleet. Welding sparks lit up the darkness, and the sound of metal on metal echoed through the massive chambers. These ships had been under construction for 5 years, in secret facilities hidden from Council surveillance. Earth had learned early that the Council spied on all member species to ensure no one developed weapons that could threaten the established order. Humanity had built these shipyards in the dark side of the moon, where Council sensors could not reach. Chief Engineer Danny Price stood beside Lisa and pulled up holographic blueprints of the new cruisers. Each ship was armed with kinetic accelerators that could launch tungsten rods at incredible speeds. The technology was ancient by galactic standards. Most Council species had abandoned kinetic weapons thousands of years ago in favor of energy beams and plasma cannons. Those weapons were more efficient and more powerful, but they all relied on one thing: they could be blocked by energy shields. The Zephrons had the best shields in known space. Their defensive technology could absorb and deflect almost any energy weapon. But shields were designed to stop energy, not matter. A solid tungsten rod moving at a fraction of light speed would punch straight through those shields like they were not even there. Danny explained that each ship carried enough ammunition for sustained combat operations. The rods were cheap to manufacture and did not require exotic materials or complex power systems. Earth had produced millions of them over the past 3 years. The Council had noticed the increased mining operations in the asteroid belt, but they assumed humans were just expanding their industrial base. They never imagined Earth was preparing for war. Lisa smiled as she thought about how shocked the Council would be when they saw these weapons in action. The galaxy had ignored and dismissed humanity for so long. They were about to learn a painful lesson. In a secure facility beneath the surface of Earth, Captain Ryan Foster briefed his special operations team. 20 soldiers sat in the briefing room and listened as Ryan explained their mission. They were going to infiltrate the Zephron command station at Helios Prime and extract High Commander Vex Lar. The station was located deep in Zephron space and was protected by multiple layers of security. Getting in would require perfect timing and flawless execution. Ryan had spent the past month studying the station layout and security protocols. He knew every corridor and every guard station and every emergency procedure. Sergeant Nicole Webb raised her hand and asked how they would get past the security sensors. Ryan smiled and explained that Earth had developed new stealth technology based on research from 6 different species. The suits they would wear could bend light around the wearer and mask their thermal signature. The Zephrons would not be able to see them even if they walked right past a guard. The team would infiltrate 3 days before the fleet arrived. They would position themselves near the command center and wait for the attack to begin. When the Zephrons were distracted by the fleet engagement, the team would breach the command center and grab Vex Lar. The team spent the next 2 days training in a full-scale mock-up of the Zephron command station. They practiced the breach procedures until every movement was automatic. Ryan watched his people work and felt confident they would succeed. These were not regular soldiers. They were veterans of conflicts the Council had forced Earth to fight alone. When human colonies were attacked by pirates, the Council did nothing. When Earth requested military assistance, the Council said it was not their concern. Humanity had learned to fight their own battles, and they had become very good at it. Across Earth, similar preparations were taking place. At Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado, pilots trained in new combat maneuvers, designed specifically to counter Zephron tactics. The Zephrons relied on their shields and long-range weapons. They preferred to stay at a distance and wear down their opponents with sustained fire. Human pilots were training to close the distance fast and get inside the Zephron defensive perimeter, where their heavy shields would be a disadvantage. In laboratories around the planet, scientists put the finishing touches on new weapon systems and defensive technologies. Everything had to be perfect. Earth would only get one chance at this. President Maria Caldwell sat in the White House Situation Room with her cabinet and reviewed the final plans. Secretary of Defense Kevin Morris laid out the timeline. The fleet would launch in 48 hours. They would jump directly into the Draxo system and begin the attack immediately. The operation was expected to last 6 hours, from start to finish. During that time, Earth would disable the Zephron military infrastructure and capture Vex Lar. After that, the fleet would broadcast a message to the Galactic Council and make their demands clear. Earth wanted full Council membership with voting rights. Earth wanted equal standing among the civilized species. Earth wanted the laws to apply to everyone, not just the weak. Caldwell knew the Council would refuse. They would condemn Earth and threaten sanctions and military action. But she also knew the Council was not prepared for a real fight. The major species had grown soft over thousands of years of peace. They had forgotten what war actually meant. Earth was about to remind them. Caldwell had spent her entire political career trying to work within the system. She had believed that patience and diplomacy would eventually win Earth the respect they deserved. New Portland had proven her wrong. The Council only respected strength. Very well. Earth would show them strength. The meeting ended, and the cabinet members dispersed to their various duties. Caldwell remained in the Situation Room and stared at the tactical displays. She thought about the 2 million people who died on New Portland. She thought about all the human colonies that had been attacked over the years, while the Council did nothing. She thought about the countless requests for help that were ignored or delayed or dismissed. The anger she felt was cold and focused. This was not about revenge. This was about survival. If Earth did not act now, they would forever be victims in a galaxy that did not care about justice. Vice Admiral Lisa Grant returned to her office and found a message waiting from Admiral Holland. The message was brief. All ships were to be ready for deployment in 36 hours. Final weapons tests were to be completed immediately. All personnel were to be briefed on rules of engagement. The operation was going forward as planned. Lisa forwarded the message to every ship commander in the fleet. Across Earth orbit and around Luna Station, crews began final preparations. Engineers ran system checks. Weapons officers calibrated targeting systems. Medical teams prepared for casualties. On the ESS Valiant, Commander Jake Morrison assembled his bridge crew for a final briefing. He explained the mission objectives and the rules of engagement. They were not going to target civilians. They were not going to destroy more than necessary. This was a surgical strike, designed to cripple Zephron military capability and send a message. Earth was not a genocidal species. They were not going to become what they hated. But they were also not going to be victims anymore. The crew understood. They had all lost friends or family on New Portland. They wanted justice, not revenge. The hours ticked down. Across the fleet, soldiers and sailors and officers waited for the order to launch. Some wrote letters to loved ones. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Some simply sat in silence and thought about what was coming. Everyone knew this mission would change everything. Either Earth would succeed and force the Council to recognize them as equals, or they would fail, and humanity would be crushed by the combined might of the galactic powers. There was no middle ground. There was no going back. In 36 hours, the galaxy would learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The Zephron home system of Draxos looked peaceful in the light of its orange sun. Cargo ships moved between the inner planets, carrying goods and resources. Military patrols followed their standard routes with the casual confidence of a species that had not faced a real threat in centuries. The planetary shields around Draxos Prime glowed with soft blue light. Those shields had protected the homeworld for 300 years. The Zephrons believed they were invincible. High Commander Vexlar sat in his command center, on the surface, and reviewed routine reports. He had not thought about New Portland since the attack. It had been a minor operation, designed to teach the humans their place. The Galactic Council had accepted his apology and closed the matter. As far as Vexlar was concerned, the incident was over. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Draxos system without warning. 20 warships appeared in perfect formation with the ESS Valiant at the lead. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and watched the tactical display light up with Zephron defensive positions. The perimeter defense stations had not yet detected the human ships. Jake had exactly 90 seconds before the Zephron sensors registered their presence. He gave the order to fire. The kinetic accelerators unleashed their first salvo. Tungsten rods launched from every ship and streaked across space faster than the eye could follow. The rods covered the distance to the nearest defense station in less than 10 seconds. The Zephron shields activated automatically when the sensors detected incoming projectiles. The defensive AI calculated trajectory and velocity and determined there was no threat. The objects were solid matter, not energy weapons. The shields were designed to stop energy. They did nothing to stop the tungsten rods. 8 defense stations exploded in rapid succession. Debris and atmosphere vented into space as the rods punched completely through the structures. Zephron crews died instantly, never understanding what had killed them. Alarms began screaming across the entire system. Military vessels scrambled to intercept the human fleet. Vexlar rushed to his command center display and stared in shock at the destruction. Jake Morrison watched the tactical display update in real time. The first wave of attacks had eliminated the outer defense perimeter. Now, the fleet split into 3 groups. One group moved to engage the Zephron military vessels. Another group headed for the orbital defense platforms around Draxos Prime. The third group made for the planet itself. Jake commanded the planetary assault group. His mission was to disable the shield generators and provide cover for Captain Ryan Foster's extraction team. The ESS Valiant accelerated toward the planet, and the other cruisers followed in tight formation. Zephron interceptors tried to block their path, but human pilots had trained for this. They closed the distance fast and got inside the Zephron defensive perimeter, where the enemy's superior range meant nothing. On the surface of Draxos Prime, Captain Ryan Foster and his team had been in position for 3 days. They had infiltrated the command center district during a shift change when security was weakest. Their stealth suits had worked perfectly. Zephron guards had walked within meters of them and never noticed. The team had hidden in maintenance tunnels beneath the command center and waited. When the attack began and alarms started blaring, Ryan gave the signal. His team moved through the tunnels with practiced efficiency. They placed explosive charges on the shield generator control systems. The generators themselves were too large to destroy quickly, but the control systems were vulnerable. Sergeant Nicole Webb set the last charge and triggered the detonator. The explosions rippled through the underground facility. Control panels shattered and power conduits melted. On the surface, the planetary shields flickered and died. The blue glow that had protected Draxos Prime for centuries vanished in an instant. Vexlar watched his displays in growing horror as every defensive system went offline. He shouted orders, but his subordinates had no answers. They had never trained for this kind of attack. The Zephron military had not fought a real war in living memory. They had no doctrine for dealing with an enemy that fought the way humans fought. The ESS Valiant reached low orbit, and Jake Morrison opened a communication channel that broadcast on every frequency. His voice boomed through speakers in every building and every ship in the system. He identified himself and explained why Earth was there. He told them about New Portland. He told them about the 2 million civilians the Zephrons had murdered. He told them about the 17 formal complaints the Council had ignored. He told them that the Galactic Council had refused to provide justice. Therefore, Earth would provide it themselves. The message was broadcast in every major galactic language. There would be no confusion about why this was happening. The human fleet continued its systematic destruction of Zephron military capability. Cruisers targeted weapons, platforms, and manufacturing facilities with precision fire. Not a single civilian structure was hit. Human targeting computers had been programmed with strict rules of engagement. This was not genocide. This was justice. The Zephrons had murdered civilians deliberately. Earth would destroy military targets only. Every shot was calculated and verified before firing. The difference between human warfare and Zephron warfare was on full display. The Zephrons had attacked soft targets because they were easy. Humans attacked hard targets because they were legitimate. Captain Ryan Foster led his team through the command center as Zephron security forces tried to organize a response. The security troops were trained for ceremonial duty, not combat. They wore decorative armor and carried weapons they barely knew how to use. Ryan's team had fought in a dozen conflicts across human space. They moved through the building like ghosts. Zephron guards fell before they could raise their weapons. The team reached the command center main floor and breached the door with shaped charges. Vexlar stood at his command station, surrounded by his senior staff. He reached for a weapon, but Nicole Webb shot it out of his hand. Ryan Foster stepped forward and spoke in perfect Zephron language. He informed Vexlar that he was under arrest for war crimes and genocide. Vexlar would be taken to Earth to stand trial. The Zephron commander tried to protest, but Ryan did not care. He ordered his team to secure the prisoner. They placed restraints on Vexlar and escorted him from the command center. Outside, a human shuttle waited with engines hot. The team loaded their prisoner and lifted off. Zephron interceptors tried to pursue, but human fighters drove them back. The shuttle docked with the ESS Valiant, and Ryan delivered Vexlar to the brig. The extraction had taken less than 30 minutes from breach to extraction. It had gone exactly as planned. In orbit above Draxos Prime, the battle was winding down. The Zephron fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants. Their orbital platforms were destroyed or disabled. Their shipyards burned. Their weapons facilities were smoking ruins. The human fleet had accomplished in 4 hours what should have been impossible. They had crippled a major Council species military force with minimal casualties. Jake Morrison surveyed the tactical display and confirmed all objectives were met. He opened another communication channel and broadcast directly to Galactic Council headquarters. His message was simple and direct. Earth had taken action because the Council had failed. High Commander Vexlar was in human custody and would face justice. The Zephron military had been neutralized. This was Earth's response to the destruction of New Portland. The Council had 72 hours to respond to Earth's demands for full membership and equal standing. If the Council refused, Earth would continue to enforce justice in their own way. The message ended, and Jake ordered the fleet to hold position. They would remain in Draxos orbit until the Council responded. The Zephrons were no longer a threat. Their remaining ships were pulling back to defensive positions around their colonies. They made no attempt to engage the human fleet. The battle was over. Earth had won a complete and total victory. But the real test was still to come. The Galactic Council would not accept this defeat quietly. They would demand explanations and threaten retaliation. Jake knew the next phase of Operation Reckoning would be fought with words, not weapons. Ambassador Helen Brooks would have to face down the entire Council and make them understand that everything had changed. Humanity would never again be dismissed or ignored. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive amphitheater, and their angry voices created a storm of sound that echoed off the high ceiling. Translators struggled to keep up with the flood of accusations and demands. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Helen Brooks. She was the first human ever allowed to address the full Council assembly. The irony was not lost on her. For 50 years, Earth had begged for this opportunity. Now, they had it, because they had forced the issue at gunpoint. Helen stood straight and calm, while alien representatives shouted at her from all directions. She had prepared for this moment. She knew exactly what she needed to say. Chancellor Mordaunt of the Ascended slammed his ceremonial staff against the platform. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. The shouting gradually died down. Mordaunt was the oldest being in the Council. His species had been spacefaring for 20,000 years. He looked down at Helen with barely concealed contempt. His voice was cold when he spoke. He told Helen that Earth had committed an act of unprecedented aggression against a Council member species. Humanity had violated every treaty governing civilized conduct. Earth had attacked without authorization or warning. The Council demanded an immediate withdrawal of human forces from Zephron space and the return of High Commander Vex Lar. Earth would face sanctions and possible military action if they did not comply. Helen waited until Mordaunt finished speaking. Then she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. She asked Mordaunt if he remembered the 17 formal complaints Earth had filed about Zephron aggression over the past decade. She asked if he remembered how each complaint was dismissed, or delayed, or simply ignored. She asked if he remembered New Portland. 2 million human civilians murdered in cold blood. The Council had declared it an unfortunate incident and closed the investigation in 6 hours. The Zephron ambassador had offered an apology, and the Council had accepted it. Helen asked Mordaunt a direct question. Which violated the spirit of civilized conduct more? Earth's response, or the Council's indifference? The chamber erupted again. Half the representatives shouted their agreement with Helen. The other half condemned her words as disrespectful. Mordaunt slammed his staff repeatedly, but it took several minutes to restore order. He told Helen that the Council's decisions were final and not subject to challenge by minor species. Helen laughed. The sound was sharp and cold, and it cut through the noise. She repeated his words. Minor species. She asked if the Council wanted to reconsider that designation. Earth had just demonstrated both the capability and the will to defend their interests. The human fleet had defeated the Zephron military in 4 hours. They had done it without targeting civilians or using weapons of mass destruction. Earth had shown precision and restraint even in the midst of justified retaliation. Massive holographic displays around the chamber began showing footage from Vex Lar's trial on Earth. The Zephron commander sat in a secure courtroom while prosecutors presented evidence. Communication logs showed Vex Lar ordering the attack on New Portland. Tactical plans showed that civilian targets were deliberately chosen for maximum casualties. Attack footage showed Zephron ships systematically destroying hospitals and schools. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Judge Patricia Stone presided over the proceedings with absolute neutrality. She asked Vexlar how he pleaded to charges of genocide and war crimes. The Zephron's translator rendered his response. He claimed the council had authorized proportional response to human expansion in contested space. He claimed he acted within his authority. Attorney Sam Jackson stood and presented the counter-argument. New Portland had no military presence, no weapons facilities, no shipyards, no strategic value whatsoever. It was a civilian colony, established in unclaimed space. Vexlar had murdered 2 million people because the council gave the Zephrons preferential treatment in territorial disputes. The prosecution had documented 23 cases over 15 years, where the council ruled in favor of Zephron claims, despite clear evidence that humans had arrived first. The pattern was obvious. The council protected the strong and punished the weak. Earth had tried to work within that system, and it had cost them millions of lives. Back in the council chamber, Helen continued her address. She told the assembled representatives that Earth was not asking for permission anymore. They were informing the council of the new reality. Earth demanded full membership with voting rights. Earth demanded that laws apply equally to all species, regardless of military power. Earth demanded that Vexlar's trial be recognized as legitimate and that his sentence be enforced. The council could accept these demands, or they could refuse. If they refused, Earth would continue to enforce justice in their own way every time it became necessary. Humanity had tried diplomacy for 50 years. The council had taught them that the only language they respected was strength. Very well. Humans were fast learners. Chancellor Mordan's expression darkened. He asked what would happen if the council refused Earth's demands. Helen's smile grew colder. She told him that 40 human warships currently held position outside the council station. They were not threatening anyone. They were simply present. A reminder that Earth's words were backed by capability. If the council wanted to test human resolve, they were welcome to try. But they should remember that the Zephrons had the best defensive technology in known space, and it had not saved them. Earth had spent 50 years studying every council species. They knew the strengths and weaknesses of every military in the galaxy. They had planned for this contingency since the day they were first dismissed as too primitive to matter. The debate raged for 3 days. Council members argued among themselves about how to respond. Some wanted to mobilize a military response and crush Earth before they became too powerful. Others pointed out that such an action would prove Earth's point about council hypocrisy. A few representatives from smaller species quietly voiced support for Earth's demands. They had suffered under council indifference for generations. They had watched as powerful species ignored the rules with no consequences. Earth's actions gave them hope that things could change. The council was deeply divided. For the first time in its long history, there was no clear consensus on how to proceed. Ambassador Helen Brooks met privately with representatives from 30 minor species. They gathered in a secure conference room, away from the main chamber. These were the powerless members of the council. Species that had no real voice in galactic affairs. They told Helen about their own experiences with council injustice. Territorial disputes decided in favor of stronger species. Trade agreements that exploited their resources. Military aggression that went unpunished. They had all filed complaints, just like Earth. They had all been ignored. Helen listened carefully and took notes. She was building a coalition. Earth alone could force the council to respond, but they could not force lasting change. That would require allies. The vote came on the 4th day. Chancellor Mordan presented the resolution. Earth would receive provisional council membership, pending a review period. They would have voting rights on matters that directly concerned them. The laws would be reviewed to ensure equal application across all species. A committee would be formed to investigate past complaints that had been dismissed without proper consideration. It was not everything Helen had demanded, but it was a beginning. The vote was close. 97 species voted in favor. 93 voted against. 10 abstained. Earth had won by the narrowest possible margin. Helen stood before the council one final time. She thanked them for taking the first step toward real justice. She reminded them that Earth sought partnership, not domination. Humanity had proven their strength, but they wanted to use that strength to protect the weak, not exploit them. The galaxy was changing whether the council liked it or not. Species that had been silent for generations were finding their voice. Earth would stand with them. The old order, where might made right, was ending. A new order, based on actual justice and equality, was beginning. The council could either adapt or become irrelevant. Outside the council station, the human fleet maintained position for another week. Then they began returning to Earth space in groups. Commander Jake Morrison brought the ESS Valiant home to a hero's welcome. Crowds gathered in every major city to celebrate. President Caldwell addressed the world and told them that Earth had finally achieved recognition as an equal among the stars. The cost had been terrible. New Portland would never be forgotten. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. Humanity would never again stand alone against injustice. They had allies now. They had respect. Most importantly, they had proven that they would fight for what was right, no matter the cost. 6 months had passed since Operation Reckoning, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. Earth maintained the largest fleet of any council member species now. Human warships patrolled trade routes and responded to distress calls from colonies that the council had ignored for decades. Captain Jake Morrison had been promoted after the Draxos campaign. He now commanded a battle group consisting of 5 heavy cruisers and their support vessels. His current assignment was to meet with representatives from 3 minor species who had requested Earth's assistance. The meeting took place aboard the ESS Valiant in a secure conference room. Ambassador Kell of the Prios Union arrived first. His species had been members of the Council for 800 years, but they had never been treated as equals. Kell explained that his homeworld was facing aggression from the Torvan Confederation. The Torvans wanted to claim Prios mining colonies in a disputed region. The Prios had filed complaints with the Council, but nothing had been done. The Torvans were a powerful species with strong political connections. The Council always sided with them in territorial disputes. Kell asked if Earth would consider providing military support. He knew it was a bold request. Earth had no obligation to help them. But the Prios had heard about Operation Reckoning. They knew humans stood against injustice. Jake listened carefully as the other 2 ambassadors presented similar stories. The pattern was always the same. Powerful council species bullied weaker ones. Complaints were filed and ignored. The strong did whatever they wanted because they knew there would be no consequences. Jake reviewed the data they provided. He studied territorial maps and historical records and communication logs. Everything they claimed could be verified. These were not made-up grievances. These were real injustices that the Council refused to address. Jake told them he could not promise military intervention. Earth was not trying to become the galaxy's police force, but he promised to bring their cases to the Council with Earth's full support. If the Council failed to act, Earth would discuss other options. The 3 ambassadors looked relieved. Just having Earth's attention meant something. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that humans kept their promises. When Earth said they would do something, they did it. That reliability was becoming Earth's greatest asset. Species that had no reason to trust the Council were beginning to trust humanity. It was a responsibility Jake took seriously. Earth had fought for respect, and now they had it. They could not waste that respect on empty promises or half measures. When Earth committed to something, they had to see it through. On Earth, President Maria Caldwell met with her expanded cabinet. The past 6 months had been exhausting but productive. Earth's economy was booming. Trade agreements with minor species brought new resources and technologies. The shipyards were building vessels for export now. Other species wanted ships built with human engineering because they were reliable and effective. General Linda Hayes provided an update on fleet readiness. Every battle group was at full strength. Training exercises with allied species were scheduled for the next quarter. Several council members had requested joint operations to learn from human tactics. Secretary of Defense Kevin Morris pointed out the irony. 6 months ago, the council dismissed Earth as too primitive to matter. Now those same species were begging for military cooperation. The power dynamics had shifted completely. But Caldwell reminded everyone that power without responsibility was tyranny. Earth had fought against that kind of abuse. They could not become what they hated. Every decision they made now would set precedents for decades. They had to be careful to use their strength wisely. The goal was to create a more just galaxy, not to replace one set of tyrants with another. Ambassador Helen Brooks sat in her new office at Council headquarters, reviewing requests for Earth's support. There were dozens. Species from every corner of known space were reaching out to humanity. Some wanted military assistance. Others wanted diplomatic support. Some just wanted Earth to pay attention to issues the Council ignored. Helen could not possibly respond to every request personally. She had assembled a staff of diplomats and analysts who helped prioritize cases. They focused on situations where Earth's involvement could make a real difference. Clear cases of injustice where the facts were undeniable. Situations where the Council's inaction was inexcusable. Her assistant, Ben Carter, entered the office with urgent news. The Council had approved Earth's petition for full membership. The vote had been unanimous this time. The review period was over, and Earth was now a permanent Council member with full voting rights. Helen smiled at the news. It had taken 6 months of constant pressure and diplomatic maneuvering, but they had achieved what 50 years of patient negotiation could not. Ben asked if she wanted to make a public statement. Helen told him to prepare something emphasizing partnership and cooperation. Earth's message needed to be clear. They had changed the Council through strength, but they would maintain their position through integrity. In a maximum security facility on Earth, High Commander Vexlar served his sentence. He had been convicted of genocide and war crimes by a jury of his peers. The trial had been broadcast throughout the galaxy. Every species had watched as evidence was presented and witnesses testified. The verdict was unanimous, and the sentence was life imprisonment, without possibility of parole. Vexlar had been the first, but not the last. 3 other military commanders from different species were now awaiting trial for similar crimes. Earth had established an independent war crimes tribunal that operated outside Council jurisdiction. The Council had protested at first, but then quietly began referring cases to the tribunal. It was easier than dealing with the political fallout themselves. Captain Jake Morrison visited New Portland during a supply run. The colony was being rebuilt. Construction crews from a dozen species worked alongside human engineers. The memorial at the colony center listed every name of those who died in the attack. 2 million names carved into black stone that stretched for kilometers. Jake stood in front of the memorial and read names at random: teachers and doctors and farmers and children. People who had done nothing wrong except be human in a galaxy that did not care. Beneath the names an inscription was carved. They were not forgotten. Justice was served. Jake touched the stone and made a silent promise. Their sacrifice would mean something. Earth would make sure of it. Executive Officer Amy Carter joined him at the memorial. She had lost family here. Coming back was painful, but necessary. She told Jake that her sister would have been proud of what Earth accomplished. The colony was being rebuilt stronger than before. Defensive platforms orbited overhead. A garrison of human marines provided security. New Portland would never be vulnerable again. More importantly, it had become a symbol. Every species in the galaxy knew what happened here. They knew Earth's response. They knew that attacking humans came with consequences. That deterrence had prevented conflicts. Several species that might have tested Earth's resolve decided it was not worth the risk. Jake and Amy walked through the rebuilt sections of the colony. Schools were opening. Hospitals were treating patients. Families were moving into new homes. Life was returning to New Portland. Children played in parks that had been craters 6 months ago. The sound of their laughter was the best evidence that Earth had made the right choice. These people were alive and safe because humanity had stood up and said enough. The Council had learned that humans protected their own. Every species considering aggression against Earth now had to factor in the possibility of facing the same fate as the Zephrons. The ESS Valiant departed New Portland and headed back toward the core systems. Jake sat in his command chair and reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The galaxy was changing in ways no one had predicted. Minor species were forming alliances and demanding better treatment. The Council was implementing reforms that had been needed for centuries. Power structures that had seemed permanent were being questioned, all because Earth had refused to accept injustice. Jake felt the weight of responsibility that came with being a symbol. Every action Earth took now would be scrutinized. They had to be better than the species they criticized. They had to prove that strength and justice could coexist. Back on Earth, President Caldwell addressed the world on the anniversary of Operation Reckoning. She spoke about the cost of standing up for principles. New Portland would always be a wound in humanity's memory. But from that tragedy had come change. Earth had a voice now. More importantly, Earth was using that voice to speak for species that had been silent. The galaxy was becoming more just because humanity had demanded it. That was the legacy of those who died on New Portland. Their deaths had meaning because Earth gave them meaning. Future generations would look back on this moment as the turning point when humanity became not just survivors but leaders. The broadcast ended, and Caldwell sat alone in the Oval Office. She thought about the decisions that had brought them to this point. The choice to authorize Operation Reckoning had been the hardest of her life. She had known it would work or it would doom humanity to isolation and conflict. Looking back, she knew it was the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing required force. Sometimes justice required strength. The galaxy respected Earth now, not because humans were peaceful, but because they had proven they would fight when necessary. That respect created opportunities for diplomacy that patience alone never could. Across human space, people celebrated the anniversary in different ways. Some held memorials for the dead. Others celebrated Earth's victory over injustice. All of them understood that something fundamental had changed. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage as junior partners, hoping for acceptance. They had been dismissed and exploited and ignored. Now they stood as equals with the power to protect not just themselves, but others who needed protection. The galaxy had tried to keep Earth in its place. Instead, Earth had changed the galaxy. That was humanity's true victory. Not the military success at Draxos, but the lasting change they had forced throughout known space. The Council was learning that justice applied to everyone, or it meant nothing. Earth had taught them that lesson, and the lesson would not be forgotten.